The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Do you have a general objection before we get to the question of the witness's qualifications?
Yes, I have the objection to the relevance. The objectors carry the burden of proof to show that the candidate is not eligible under New Jersey statutes. Photographs are not relevant to the discussion of the law today. I understand that they have great arguments, but they're not legal arguments, and we are in the court of law. And then I have the expert issue.
Well, I mean, I guess part of the problem here is, I mean, you have a general objection that this whole issue is relevant.
Even if it were relevant, it's not relevant to the legal issues, which are the underlying issues we're disputing today and trying to resolve.
I've already addressed that, Your Honor. It's the same objection, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, I think it's the same objection. And the witness is going to testify that he looked at the computer, and from that he made an analysis of the underlying document. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, again, the document being what's on the internet. He never saw this hypothetical original document.
Then without the authentic document,
Well, see,
the authentication process is missing the link to have him be an expert
Well, Your Honor,
in any of this.
he's going to testify as to the image. That's his. Okay, but see, that counsel just said it. She goes without the authentic document. Well, that's our point. That's our exact point. Without the authentic document.
Well, then, sir, if your point is that without the authentic document, the president has not, because I think your point, and correct me if I'm wrong, your point really is, I think, that unless the president produces the original, or presumably a certified copy or something of the original document to the Secretary of State to establish where he was born, until he does that, you think he has not fulfilled his obligation, correct?
That's
and
correct.
the Secretary of State cannot fulfill her obligation in terms of allowing his name to appear in that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, that being said, let us assume that the document that he presented, I mean, because it seems to me that your argument is not really, at this point, is not really whether the document in fact is a legitimate document. Your objection is whatever he claims is the document is never presented. Therefore, the Secretary of State doesn't have what you believe to be the necessary initial proof to establish identity to allow Mr. Obama to appear, correct? Isn't that really what you, because we're getting off into this question of, well, is the document that he claims is the birth certificate, is that authentic? But of course, your argument really is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's an initial obligation on the part of Mr. Obama to establish his identity, and that by not producing anything to the Secretary of State, he has not even met the initial obligation. Then you could, if he did produce it, then arguably you could say, what he produced is a forgery, and now we're going to go after the legitimacy of what he produced. But your position, I think, your legal position here is that he didn't even meet the fundamental obligation that you think he has.
Yes,
so that we don't even get to, if you're correct, we never even get to the question of whether the document that wasn't produced is a actual legitimate document. We don't even get to that.
That's correct.
If you're correct.
Yes.
So that being the case, if that's your legal position, and I want to be careful here, if that's your legal position, what's the relevance of this testimony? Because he didn't produce the document. So he has not said to the Secretary of State, here is my birth certificate that I say tells where I was born, and I stand on this.
Yes.
And now somebody could examine that and say, no, this is a forgery, and here's how it's a forgery, and therefore he can't stand on that. But your position in this case, which is I think what you're arguing to me, is he hasn't even gotten to that point. We don't even have to worry about whether what he has is a forgery or not, because he hasn't produced it to the Secretary of State, and you're saying he's got an initial obligation to do that, and he hasn't done it. Isn't that your legal position?
Yes, Your Honor, the problem is,
Can I put something on record?
Well, let me hear, before you do, let me hear why he thinks this is even relevant. Because, I mean, it seems to me that this might be highly relevant if he had produced something and you said, Secretary of State has this, but it's a forgery. But the Secretary of State, we know the Secretary of State doesn't have it. They don't think it's necessary to be produced. You think it does. That's the legal issue here. It seems to me this is a secondary issue that's at best premature in regard to the issue in the case before me. It may be relevant in some other case that might happen somewhere else in some day, but in this case, it seems to me that it's entirely premature.
yeah, the problem, Your Honor, is that since there is no evidence, documentary evidence, competent and sufficient evidence has been produced, okay, Mr. Obama must be relying on something.
Oh, not according to Ms. Hill.
Something.
Well, Ms. Hill's position, I think, is he doesn't have to rely on anything because he doesn't have the obligation that you say he does. Isn't that your
Yeah, I mean,
position?
among other things, but also, even if the petitioners did have an authentic copy of his birth certificate, there's no requirement under New Jersey law that candidates for president on the primary ballot publish, produce, or release an official birth certificate. The claim is not relevant in the inclusion. Additionally, there's been no verified contrary evidence versus Obama saying that he does not have a verified
So let me ask
authenticated
you,
birth
Ms. Hill,
certificate.
is it your position here that the document on the internet is legally irrelevant for this case?
Yes.
And indeed, you can see that Mr. Obama has not produced a alleged birth certificate to the Secretary of State saying, here's my birth certificate.
Not to my knowledge, I know he released it nationally and everyone can go and.
But he's not done today.
No, I don't have any personal knowledge.
That he
of him.
specifically has provided, and you have not provided it today.
No.
Because there's at least one case, I think in Illinois, if I remember seeing, where they actually, the Obama, whoever represented, I guess the campaign, actually produced that document in court. And I don't want to get into the vagaries of Illinois
yes.
law and so forth. I don't know what happened there or what the Illinois law required, so I won't get into that. But you have not done that here.
No, it is not relevant to the proceeding today.
It seems to me, counsel, that this issue, as interesting as it might be to you, and maybe, you know, I think it's premature. It's not what you're really arguing is the issue in this case.
Your Honor, you know, here's the danger. Now, we heard counsel say, oh, but he released it nationally. Okay, so we have this
No,
matter.
in this record,
Yes, well,
sir, the record in this case, there is no evidence in the record in this case, which is what this case must be decided on by both myself, the Secretary of State, and the appellate courts.
Okay.
There is no evidence in this case that, and Ms. Hill concedes it, that the Obama campaign, or Mr. Obama himself, have produced any birth certificate whatsoever to the Secretary of State of New Jersey or to this judge sitting in, and I sit here for the Secretary of State. There is no evidence in the record that such has been done. If your legal position is correct, you probably win right there. If your legal position on that issue,
Yes.
if your legal position is correct. So the question of whether if the document that was produced turned out to be a forgery, it seems to me is irrelevant because he hasn't produced it. So we don't know what he would produce if he had to come in here and, you know, if I said, theoretically, the law requires that it be produced. And all of a sudden, magically, the helicopter landed, somebody ran out, handed us, here's the birth certificate. Now, you know, if you want to say, well, that certificate is a forgery and therefore can't be accepted, then this might be relevant. But we haven't even gotten that far.
I just wanted to raise the issue that it's not on Obama for America to present a birth certificate. The burden in this case is on the objectors to prove that the candidate is ineligible under New Jersey statute.
That's a burden of law issue. Counsel suggests, as I understand his position, that there's a fundamental qualified requirement before that, before the challenge in effect, that the candidate must affirmatively establish, you know, present a record of his birth or some, and I understand you don't think he has that obligation. He does.
But if it's not necessary for to have consent of the candidate, you could have Mickey Mouse per se on this, and everyone can sign up and go with it. It's not.
That's happened before.
Yeah, it's not necessary in this proceeding. And obviously, in other cases, you know, there have been these kind of cases around the country, and people have produced different types of evidence. Obviously, it has not been accepted.
My understanding of the legal argument in this case is correct, and I think counsel that it is. argument here is not that the document that was produced is forged, because you say you didn't produce a document. And there is no evidence in this record, I can assure you that there was no evidence in this record that the document has been produced to the Secretary of State or me, and this record must be decided on. The fact that they may have posted it on the internet somewhere, from the White House or wherever, the campaign, whoever it was that posted something that is not before me and is not before the Secretary of State, is not part of the record in this case, means that it's not here. Now, if you're correct in your legal position that it has to essentially be here, having been somehow proven to the Secretary of State, then I guess you're going to win your case. And if it had been produced, then all of this might be very relevant to say, well, he produced, but it's a forgery, it's not real, and all that. There's nothing in the record. He hasn't produced anything. I have nothing before me that I can look at. And this goes to your point. I mean, if you're right, this wins the case for you in a sense. I have nothing here that I can look at and say, oh, okay, this is what's been produced as his birth certificate. There is nothing here. The campaign has not offered me anything. I assume you're not planning on doing that. The campaign hasn't offered me anything. They haven't shown me anything on the internet. They haven't
They're offering mugs, Your Honor.
Pardon?
Mugs, they're offering mugs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Coffee mugs.
Yeah. When they're asked to produce the birth certificate.
Excuse me, sir. In this case, I don't know anything about mugs. I haven't produced mugs for me. There's no birth certificate that has been presented to me, good, bad, indifferent, real, forged, certified, anything. It's not here. So a debate about whether what he put on, what has been put on the internet as the birth certificate, and whether that is a legitimate birth certificate, is not relevant to your legal argument before me. And therefore, there's no reason for me to hear it.
That's perfectly fine with our position, provided that counsel is willing to stipulate that whatever's on the internet will not be considered as evidence of a birth certificate.
I assume.
Either by Your Honor or the Secretary of State.
Well, I can't.
That's the problem.
I
That's the
cannot.
problem.
Excuse me. The Secretary of State under the law is limited in deciding this case to the evidence that's produced in this record and obviously the law. And you know, if the Secretary of State were to determine that she thought it was necessary to get into evidence about the legitimacy of something that's sitting on the internet, as a birth certificate, then I suppose the Secretary of State could remand this case. And I'm certainly not looking for a remand because we don't have a lot of time, as you well know. But to get into issues about, you know, and believe me, to get into issues about the authenticity of this and the qualifications of the witness to testify and what his opinion is and all this about something that isn't even here. And Ms. Hill has admitted, agreed, stipulated, whatever you want to say, that she is not producing any version of a birth certificate whatsoever. In fact, she doesn't even think legally that they have to. That's her legal position.
Yeah, well, can we have a clear stipulation that that internet birth certificate is in no way evidence in any shape or form of whether...
In this case.
Yes, in this case.
It's not before me, it's not...
Can we have a stipulation?
Ms. Hill, it's certainly
Yeah,
not in the record.
I'm not presenting in this case, no.
The internet image.
I don't have it.
It's not here. I can assure you, I've never seen it, I haven't looked at it, I'm certainly not going to look at it in regard to deciding this case. It has not been offered, it's not in the record, and the Secretary, and my understanding of the law, and I've been doing this for a long time, is the Secretary of State can't suddenly look at the internet and say, oh, there's the birth certificate, because that would be outside the record of this case.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.